Good day, Reed here. I'm back at my home chicken coop and little garden area, and I thought I'd give you a little extra walk around, see how things are doing. It's was it like maybe the 18th or something of May, 2024. And for starters, I've got this is not a potato tower per se because it doesn't have a cage around it, but I do keep adding material to it. It's getting close to 2 feet off the ground there. And just put that next layer of hay on it. And then right beside it, I've got some calendulas coming up, little oniony thing. I'm not actually sure how that got there. Some eeny weeny sunflowers. And I'll give you the view from here. These bales of hay, I think that the nitrogen source I gave them was not sufficient to really get the process going of what's happening there. The chickens are over there having some fun. And in my chicken coop, when I add bedding, because I'm doing a deep litter system, I'm always adding some biochar to that as well. And I should really say it's char, and that by adding it in to their litter in there, it's getting activated by all of their droppings. And by the time I clean it out and it sits for a spell, that's when it becomes biochar. So if you're buying char out there, realize that it's probably not biologically active and you need to do that. And so this back section here that you can kind of see is all green and lovely is where the run had been. From this fir tree to the arbutus little bunch in the distance is where the run had been, and I shrunk it down because it was actually just bigger than it needed to be. And all this is looking pretty good. Even the currant that's there is looking nice, whereas the currant that's just beyond, it's hard to even see it. Let's see if my finger will. Right there is puny by comparison. And as I come down here to my lower garden patch, I'm really happy that this wisteria that I got from a client is alive, and the sorrel is doing pretty good. Even the little grape that's there is happy. I've got my first batch of comfrey brewing here, which if you have access to comfrey is a really great resource to put in your garden, whether it's a mulch or otherwise. This potato tower, again, I just topped it off. It's a little more than 2 feet in material in there. I'm really curious to see how it does. And then I'm mostly weeding this, but let's, the red clover or crimson clover is looking beautiful right about now. You can see like these little kales here. The kales in the back, I don't know how well you could have seen them, but are like 3 times the size. I need to get some better material for the peas to climb up here. And then I got a few apple trees. That's a tiny apple tree there. The potatoes coming up. Here's another apple tree. And then I've got a gumi plant here, which seems really happy, and this pea that's not really doing anything. And then obviously some more weeds to be done. But it looked like this all through this area here. And so I'm slowly reclaiming it and giving all those to the chickens. And I just do that a little bit in the morning and then a little bit in the evening. Oh my gosh, no. Little flower here that's blue is borage, which is a lovely plant. But in my experience, it will take... So if you're not looking to have your garden taken over by things, then maybe be really mindful of how you plant that and don't let it go to seed. I mentioned biochar in here, and where I'm living up on this hillside, it's pretty darn dry. Now, people on the planet are doing lots of different things. Some of them are super helpful to the planet, and others are essentially destructive. And it's a good thing to every now and then examine our lifestyle and ask, are we contributing to that, or are we being of benefit? And one of my things, and why I'm happy to be doing these potato towers, is I want to be adding soil to the planet. And in that, there's a friend of mine who was saying like, oh, it's so hard to see the earth becoming so dry. And I both hear that, and there are so many solutions out there to these things that we can enact even in our own backyard, even like in a potted plant, recognizing that we're probably at some point going to, you know, dump that soil out. And when I brought forward the notion of both, you know, adding biochar to your soils intermixed with compost, especially like highly alive compost, because it's the life of the soil that really changes the game as far as like the health of it goes. I was met with the idea of like, well, what about conservation? And I was just like, okay, well, you know, biochar holds 7 times its weight in water. And if you're going to be watering your plants, then having something that's going to actually retain that moisture in your soil is a conservation effort. Um, Along with when you add compost or mulch or you're doing a cover crop to your landscape, like you might ask, like, Reed, oh, you're pulling out all these weeds here. Well, that's because I have a plan to put more plants in the ground, and a bunch of it's actually has a layer of mulch already on it. So I'm just trying to reclaim this for the plants I want here. Even, I don't know if you can see it back of me, but excuse me, the mustards are starting to go to seed, and or flower rather. And I'm actually totally cool with that. Like, it's not my favorite plant, but I want to have weeds that I like in my garden. And on the conservation side of things, I'm just like, there's so many simple steps that we can take. And a lot of people will, whether you're buying, you know, whatever you do for self care, like if it's coffee or if it's going to get a massage or you go to the gym or you eat all organic food or you play music, I don't care what it is, whatever you do, that's great. And the notion of like, oh, I have a low flush toilet, or like we use buckets over here, um, you know, or you think driving your electric vehicle or better yet, a bicycle, or even if you're driving, like me, a gas powered vehicle, all these things are different ways that we can, depending on the lens we put on it, think are helping to conserve. And when I look at the macros of it all, though, it's a tough game to claim. And when I feel like I'm actually doing benefit for the earth is when I'm really engaging with the earth, when I'm adding more material to it, when I'm doing like my chickens. Even though my wife thinks I have too many birds at right about 60, I'm just like, I get all this manure, I'm adding all this char to it, which is becoming biochar in the process. I got my comfrey tea here that I'm gonna mix in with both some of the manure that's already, you know, rested for a while to make some compost extracts and compost teas to then come and continue adding more life to the soils. All of that is when I feel like I'm doing something good for the earth. And most of the rest of life is kind of a hands in the air. I don't really know how much it's doing. So whether we're doing it on little pots on our balcony or we have a backyard that we're doing it in, even if we go for a walk in a public park and we bring out those amendments to those spaces and add them in, even if we take a step or two off the trail to do that, that's a benefit. And that sense of like, what is the commons? And do we actually participate in it? Or are we just going out to nature to climb rocks and have, you know, bike through it or whatever? Or are we sauntering? Are we ambling through? And the notion of, even when we're doing that, oftentimes there's drop sticks and things. And if you just pile them up, you're creating like small amounts of habitat for other creatures to live. And so there's a lot that we can do to conserve and to create more habitat and spaces that are going to function better for the ecosystem. Our ancestors, like way time long ago, not only was there not a difference between nature and themselves, but they were actively engaging in it. The Amazonian rainforest didn't just happen. people and other creatures engaged with it. They saw the plants that they liked. They were intercommunicating with them. That's a real thing. And they were doing horticulture, which rather than agriculture is, the culture of plants. And we are highly engaged with them. That goes to the animals too. That's a whole different game. And, whatever you are or are not capable of doing in your own life, that's okay. I think we're really hard on ourselves a lot of the time. And yeah, are there corporations and things in the world that are really screwing the pooch? Sure, definitely. Um, but I'm not on their board of directors. I'm not their CEO. I don't, you know, I'm not about to go and spend time boycotting or whatever. I think it's just more important to get in contact with the earth, have a connection there, do good things for the earth. And while you're scrolling on the internet and watching these videos here, I encourage you to go and check out like Greening the Desert. See the projects that are happening where people are taking literally landscapes that are devoid of life basically, and they are revitalizing them. And get inspired by those projects and see what you can bring into your own corner of the world. With that, thanks for watching. Have too much fun.